you have access to a spirit, a strength that enlarges and empowers you. Even better, you don't need to wait for the next big movement. You can heal the world. It's time for governance by grace. Welcome to Gracearchy with Jim Babka. Well, my friend, I think it's time to revisit that principle of human respect that we both know and love so much.
Oh, yeah. So the principle of human respect, it's a natural principle. I'll elaborate on what that is momentarily.
Yeah.
But it says that anytime violence or theft is used, an individual's happiness, harmony, and prosperity will decline. It's always, right? That's the principle.
Always.
It's a natural principle. You can see it, cause and effect. We'll get into some details about it.
You don't even need to read history. You can just look around at the last time you were on social media.
Yeah, it's all over the place. So we're going to elaborate on that today, but it really sets the stage because we're going to be talking about what a libertarian is and isn't.
Right.
And that to me is the best grounding or basis. There are several ways to arrive at a libertarian position, but that is the best grounding or basis for voluntarist libertarian thinking, the pure libertarian thinking. And so here's the issue. There's been this long-standing debate that has gone on, Bill. It's gone on since long before I was involved in any kind of libertarian movement, where there was the purists and there were the pragmatists. They would try to make this division where some people are just more open and willing to work gradually and yada, yada. Well, I have a career of having worked at Downsize DC where we did it precisely that. But I also understood where I was going and why I was going there. I understood the moral imperatives of it and how if we reduced the violence and the theft, how we could make the world better every single time we did that. We would make the world a little bit better.
It's a principle. So, it's axiomatic.
So, yeah, exactly. And so, I built an organization called the Zero Aggression Project because I wanted to advocate zero aggression, no excessive or initiated excessive force or initiated violence, right? I wanted to make that clear that was the pathway. So I have a career that has been philosophically very, very oriented towards a place of trying to make the world a better place, but I haven't stopped trying to do the things I can do to nudge things in that direction.
Sure.
And I've worked with people in a transpartisan sense on this basis. So,
hold on, time out. Can we say that word again? Transpartisan?
Transpartisan. So most things that in politics, most people think that the way that you achieve harmony is through compromise. This is what you're taught in school. It's not true. It ignores people who have strong principles. It means that the people who are most flexible are the ones that make all the decisions, and all the appeals are to my opinion, the lowest common denominator.
Yes.
What if you're really conservative? What if you're really progressive? Or what if you're like me, you believe in that the outcome should be more principled conservative when we're talking about an economic issue, or should be more principled civil libertarian when we're talking about civil liberties, and more again anti-war. You're right. There's certain things like so transpartisan means, and we're going to put we're going to bring this chart up later. But can you put the Nolan chart up now?
Sure.
I'll show you exactly what I mean.
It's a good way of looking at it.
Okay, so everybody, you're at a disadvantage, but if you are just listening on the podcast and you can't see the Nolan chart, this design of it comes from the world's smallest political quiz, which is a product of the Advocates for Self-Government. And full disclosure, it's one of the organizations I work for.
It's the reason I became a libertarian, because I didn't know.
And it's also how we met, right?
Right.
You saw something sent out on their list, and that's how you reached out, and we became in contact.
Yep.
So this chart is central to they plot people on this Nolan chart, and we will put a link up to the world's smallest political quiz in the show notes so that you can see this chart for yourself if you want to go take the quiz. And we're going to be implying and talking about the quiz a little bit during the course of this broadcast. But it is a chart that shows that politics is political thought, your ideology or your philosophy for how politics should be carried out is two-dimensional, not one. So most people think of it as a spectrum that runs from left to right. And so you can see on the chart, on one side is progressive and on the other side is conservative. So what compromise means is that moderate box in the middle is where we should land most of the time. And there's something of an Overton window, it's called, about what is acceptable political debate and where roughly we should expect the debate to land at any given moment. The progressive and the conservative sides are engaged in a tug of war to define on what that's going to be, so that it leans a little more their direction, and politics ensues. But there's another dimension. So that's the horizontal dimension. There's a vertical dimension that goes on here. And you can see that libertarians at the top and authoritarian is at the bottom. Authoritarian means that there are rules, lots of them. There are rules for everything, and everything is controlled. And if you go to the very tippy top of this chart, you would be a voluntarist. If you went to the very bottom of the chart, in fact, it's laid out for folks who are watching almost like a baseball diamond, right? With home plate, first base, second base, third base. Okay, so libertarian position is second base. If you're trying to visualize this in your head, conservative is first base, progressive is third base, and the totalitarian position would be at the home plate, right? That means that all things are under authority of the state, right? So there is a how much state do you want component. The left and the right is about your personal values, what you prioritize. And consequently, we have a party that represents the right on the Republicans for the most part, and a party that represents the left for the Democrats for the most part, except when they don't, because frankly, they're more concerned with getting reelected. But that's another episode altogether. But the libertarian and the authoritarian have no place to go. Now, increasingly, they're able to join the Democrat and Republican Party because both of them are doing kind of going down into a more authoritarian point of view, strongman government, and lots of government involved in every aspect of your life. But again, another show for another day. What I want to say about this chart is that you were asking about transpartisan. So instead of a model where we arrive at some kind of compromise in the middle, you would look at the progressive, you would look at the conservative, and you would say, what issues do you disagree on? Not where are your motives the same, because clearly their values are different.
Sure, right.
Where, if we could form a policy that was consistent with your values, and it turns out libertarians offer those types of solutions frequently, right? They can help be that bridge. So trans means it goes like an arc up and over the moderate part. It ignores that moderate middle and instead serves the principled ends. And I, as a person who was running Downsize DC, was in coalitions left and right where we were attempting to find ways to reach across lines and bring people on based on their own reasons. So the progressive would have a different motivation, the conservative would have a different motivation, but they would come to the same juncture without compromising their principles. And that's what transpartisan means.
It's really important to understand how libertarian functions as a process, as well as how libertarian, which we're going to talk about in this episode, shows up as a principle and as a point of view.
Okay, so let's pull that chart down and let's tell a little story right now, because it's a very important moment in the history of the libertarian movement. A man by the name of Jeffrey Tucker decided to write an article about two types of libertarians. It brings to mind a thought. This is, an axiomatically true statement. There are two types of people in the world. There are those who divide people into types, and there are those who do not. And Jeffrey Tucker decided to divide people into two types. He wrote an article in March of 2014. And almost everybody that has told me how much they love this article, I have not been able to resist telling them how much I hate it. The article was called Against Libertarian Brutalism. We will put a link to it in the show notes. It was very widely disseminated. It was highly, highly viral. And it has been so impactful that as recently as last year, I had somebody bring it up to me. It continues to come up in conversation a decade later, and it's now been 11 years later, Against Libertarian Brutalism by Jeffrey Tucker. He divided everybody into every libertarian into two types: humanitarians versus brutalists. Now, just based on that division, which side do you think he put himself on?
Oh, obviously, he's got to be a brutalist.
Right. So the humanitarians, it wasn't really an accurate term, because what he was advocating for in the article was for them to bring all of their other positive values into the equation. So if you're against racism, and you want to stop racism, bring that value in. If you are pro-feminism, bring that value in. If you believe in this and that and the other, bring those values in. And he added things that libertarian philosophy is not meant to address. Which brings us to the brutalist side, who say, and he caricatured, he strawmanned these people. He basically said they are willing to put out just garbage messaging because they really, really love the ugly aesthetic. So he borrowed brutalism from the Soviet design of buildings. And we have buildings that were built in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s here in the United States that have what is called brutalist architecture. And they, by the way, in a lot of cases are government buildings, but they had no art, no beauty, no aesthetic to them. They were very strictly functional.
Yeah.
And so he was basically saying, no, this is an incomplete libertarianism. A much better libertarianism is one that thinks in much more global terms and advocates for various types of categories, groups of people. You're going to see me. We're going to talk about groups here in this conversation, or more precisely, individuals. Contrast them in a moment. But he was kind of arguing for these people. Now, I think it's a straw man to call these people brutalists, because what they're doing in many cases, and I have done this myself, is they're rooting for the underdog. So libertarians have kind of this extreme empathy that's built into them, where they look around the room and they say, who is really being effed here? Who's being screwed bad? And they say, I want to defend that person. I'm concerned about the person who's not being represented in any way right now. They're being overlooked and stomped on by a system that is designed to crush people. It arrests people, it fines people, it kidnaps people, it shoots people, it drops bombs on people, whatever it's doing.
Well, let's not forget deporting people.
Deporting people, like all these things it does that are vicious and brutal and mean, that regular human beings don't do in their day-to-day action.
Right.
Most people, most of the time, are practicing the principle of human respect. They're not going around hitting people and taking their stuff because it'll achieve some social end they want. And so it's a straw man to the brutalists in many cases, and there are definitely people who give ugly messaging. I'm not going to dispute that. But the people that he was categorizing as brutalists are rooting for the underdog. What the other side was doing, the humanitarians were doing, was they were becoming cosmopolitans. They were advocating the stuff that was in the left, secular, august salons, academia, the media, etc. They were actually advocating for those things and adding those things on to libertarian thought and philosophy, and saying that you had to have this on the package too. And this is what Jeffrey Tucker was arguing for.
So
now,
to summarize here, so Jeffrey Tucker says there's a couple types of libertarians. There's the brutalists and what we'll call, because I can't think of a better word and it's easy, woke libertarians.
Yes, because I can tell you that there are people from this camp who love this article who have gone on to call themselves woke.
Sure.
There's a famous controversy involving one of the libertarian presidential candidates for declaring anti-racism.
Yep.
Okay. This is an issue, especially inside the Libertarian Party. So I want to speak just a moment in defense of brutalists. The world needs more defense attorneys and a-holes.
No, I agree with you. And I know
I'm not trying to be redundant here, right?
No.
There are times when you should just not cooperate with what's going on.
Yeah.
You should speak out against it, even if it makes everyone else in the room uncomfortable.
Yep.
Maybe you should not comply with an order that you've been given because there's a principle at stake and you're surrendering something important in the moment.
No, I can't think of any place where that would happen in our today's world. Can you?
Oh, there's tons of places where it happened. And during the recent worldwide sickness, we had people who behaved like a-holes. And, they wouldn't wear their facial covering in the right setting, or they wouldn't wear it correctly, or they would mock the wearing of it. Okay. And that was a-hole behavior. There's no two ways about it. You could just go along and get along. You could make everybody comfortable and happy and at ease, but you decided to shake things up because inside you, something stirred a feeling that said, no, there's an injustice at work here.
Something isn't
and
right
somebody
here.
needs to speak up about it.
Yeah.
Okay. And now we need that kind of thing to speak up on other issues. We're going to get to one of those before we're done. There was, in addition, this brought in this creeping cosmopolitan way of thinking into the movement. So other baggage came in, and it began a cultural civil war. Now, I have said repeatedly, that I joined a libertarian movement and a party at the time, that was my entry vector into this movement, where the pastor and the pornographer could sit next to each other in the same row at the party meeting or the convention, have a great conversation and enjoy each other's company, even if they left to go do something very different. And being libertarians, they probably argued a little. They probably debated a little, because that's what we love to do the most is, separate pepper from fly poop. It's a fun habit, right? And they probably did some of that, but they actually found that endearing in each other.
Yes.
And they learned stuff, and they didn't try. What they understood was essential at the end of the day is that regardless of whether I thought they were the action of one or the other, whether it was going to church or going to the porn set, there's a different aesthetic there. And Tucker's argument was an aesthetic argument. And because there's a different aesthetic there, that's not punishable. That's not part of the package. In fact, your ability, your right to pursue your happiness there was what we were there to discuss. Now, I can't help it. I have to conclude with an irony. So Jeffrey Tucker had basically a brand new career that started when the worldwide sickness began. And he participated in some activities that were very important, including the creation of an institute that had a blog called the Brownstone Institute. He was somebody from the very get-go who recognized that how the state was handling, how the federal government, the Trump administration at the time, but on through, Fauci and everyone else, was mishandling, botching, lying, dissembling, actually harming with their policies. And he became devoted to writing about it. And the cosmopolitans were covering their face and saying, shame on you. And they started disliking Jeffrey. In fact, they talk about, I used to like Jeffrey because they liked this article, because he made them the good guys when they were busy adding on to what libertarianism is. When he came along and started behaving like an a-hole, their judgment, he wasn't sharing their aesthetic any longer. They said he turned. They thought he changed.
Yeah, I see.
Okay. So
it's an easy mistake to make.
It's so obvious in hindsight to most people. And I couldn't fully articulate at the time what my problem with it was. I knew right away it was wrong, but I had a hard time expressing it. I began developing some ways to do it. And I can tell you in those conversations, people would ask me tough questions that I'd have to go back to the drawing board to think about a little bit more. But then he had this irony happen to him, and I watched other people attack him who had formerly thought what he was doing was.
Oh, it happens to everybody all the time. You show up on social media with one position that people like, and then you happen to have a different position that's also based on principle that people don't, and all of a sudden you're pariah.
Okay, but I think his categorization of people as brutalists was unfair, unjust, and which I've just now explained. And I also think his humanitarianism was modifying or adding. So let me just say this. Your English teacher lied to you. Your English teacher told you that nouns can be modified by adjectives. And so the main idea is the noun, and the adjective is a secondary idea. The reverse is normally true. Because if someone says, well, I'm a libertarian, but, and by the way, anything that follows the but is also going to be modifying. The modifier says, I trump you. I am always a libertarian, except when the following condition exists. So, I'm a Christian libertarian, right? Well, okay, so I'm a libertarian unless it conflicts with my Christianity. I am and this is important because this gets into something that is extremely significant and fundamental to the discussion we have to have today, and why I believe libertarian purity tests do not exist. Number one, words mean things. And we use them to differentiate.
Yes. It's how they're the only reason we can think. Without words, we wouldn't be able to have any kind of thought at all.
And we couldn't interact. It's the most fundamental transactional tool. We think of money as a transactional tool in a market, but language precedes it.
Language comes first.
Okay? And so language is incredibly important. And I want to illustrate this in the following way, because this is really, really, really super important. Okay? You've got to understand this concept that words mean things. So most human beings are omnivores. That is, they eat meat and they eat non-animal products. They have plants and other derivative products that they consume. Okay? They're an omnivore. They eat lots of things. Okay? But there are a group of people who differentiated themselves as vegetarians. So a vegetarian, by definition, does not consume meat. They don't consume meat. Now, if you say to me, well, I'm a meat-eating vegetarian, You have just said something that is absolutely meaningless.
Yes.
Okay. The word is there to describe a specific activity. We can define and know what it is. Okay. Now, it's interesting because the definition I just gave you wasn't complete enough for some people. Okay. Some people belong to the People's Front of Judea, and other people belong to the Judeans People's Front. Others are splitters, right?
Right.
And so somebody comes along and says, I'm a vegan. Now, a vegan is an even more constrained idea. The vegan not only does not consume meat, they do not consume any animal byproducts. So eggs and cheese and dairy come off the table.
Yep.
Okay. So if a vegan comes along and says, well, I eat fish on Tuesday. And I like to have ice cream for dessert.
Wait a minute.
Yes. Not a vegan anymore.
Not a vegan.
Okay. And they'll be like, well, I am basically a vegan. Well, are you really? No, because words mean things. Now, you might be able to say you're a vegetarian. We have a perfectly good word for you. You're a vegetarian.
Yeah.
But I have noticed a tendency. I even have somebody I know personally who throws around the term vegan, and I've been out with them. They are no vegan. Okay. Words mean things. And so this gets us to an important issue. It's the meat of what I want to talk about today, which is, and this is why I believe there's no such thing as a libertarian purity test. There is a difference in labeling, because it's a labeling question. Are you a libertarian or not a libertarian? Is a position libertarian or not libertarian? There is a difference between positions and persons. So a person can be a libertarian who holds non-libertarian positions, but no position becomes libertarian by virtue of the fact that a libertarian holds it.
Right.
You can't baptize a position, right? You can't suddenly say, well, a tariff is not a tax, and that's the libertarian position because I'm a libertarian. No. Right? You can't say, well, there are closed border libertarians. Well, you could say that, but your position is not libertarian. Now, you could still be a libertarian. So let me talk about what a libertarian is, and then I'm going to illustrate both of these points. So the libertarian position is concerned with aggression or the use of force. That's the question that's on the table. And the libertarians want to reduce or eliminate, zero out aggression. Zero Aggression Project is the sponsor of this show because we feature the zero aggression principle. Okay. And it is a moral statement that I am not going to use force to achieve my personal, social, and political goals. I'm not going to do it.
And that, by the way, we should say force includes not only like military force.
It includes police force too.
So police force. And it also includes the intimidation factor.
Yes.
That can come from people who are not members of the military or police people.
You're exactly right. So let me break this down because I believe there are 5 harms. Now, you're watching the show and you think I didn't cover something. Leave a note in the comments and add to my list, okay? But particularly in YouTube and Rumble, we have 5 harms that we care about as libertarians. Let me go break these down. They are: first, fraud. Number 2, theft. Number 3, threat. Number 4, initiated violence. And number 5, excessive force. I want to break
some of those words down for the newbies here who aren't used to $5 words.
The most debatable of these amongst libertarian of these 5 is fraud. It is debatable in the sense that some people consider it a form of theft, and so they consider it redundant. I break out fraud separate from theft because all other forms of theft are just overtly destructive or stealing. But I have a friend who advocates the concept he tries to sum up his libertarianism as consent culture. He was a former guest on the show, Dan Fishman. He likes to talk about consent culture. So consent culture means that I have to have your permission to do something. What happens in fraud is a confidence game occurs where you are being purposely misled and you have actually consented to your own violation.
Yeah.
And so I believe it should be distinct for that reason from the other forms of theft. If you get into the different types of theft, there's burglary and larceny and
taxation and
yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. Did I say that?
No, that's on the list. So there's all that stuff that's in there, right? But all of that stuff is destructive and uninvited in any way. It happens by surprise. Whereas the fraud, you might have been sitting there participating in the whole thing, right? So theft, as I said, covers an awful lot of ground. Don't hit people and don't take their stuff is kind of the simple version. That means no violence, no theft. So any type of theft goes on the list. Then I want to talk to the next two as a pair. There's threat and initiated violence.
Yep.
Now, our law has already accounted for these two things. There is the charge of assault and battery. Most people do not know what the definition of assault is. So assault is the imminent threat to actually carry out some form of violence.
Right.
Okay? So if I grab a club and I'm going to strike you with the club, and I even warn you that this is what I intend to do, and I'm menacing in the way that I do it, you now have a signal that I have some intent that is very, very dangerous to you. You do not have to wait to be injured necessarily to engage in an act of self-defense because the assault has already been incurred.
Yes.
And in fact, if I draw a gun, I'm a concealed carry guy. If I draw a gun and I point it at somebody, it is possible that just by virtue of that act alone, I have committed assault. The battery part means that I carried out the action or attempted to carry out the action. I attempted to initiate violence. So assault and battery are both covered under this because most of our political system operates under a coercive threat system. You understand that the state is very real and that they will throw you in a cage if they have to, and even kill you if that's what it takes to enforce their laws. You understand that things can dangerously escalate with a police officer, and they are going to be given license to shoot you. They're going to be cleared of it and continue to keep their job, and your name is going to be dragged through the mud as the victim because the cop must always be the good guy. You understand all these concepts in advance. So you understand when a theft like taxation occurs, and taxation is theft. Let me repeat that again. If you think anything different about this subject, you have taken a non-libertarian position. Taxation equals theft. If you stand up to that and say, no, I'm not going to pay the tax, well, there's going to be a series of escalating actions that could lead even to your death if you resist. That's what a law does. Every time we make a law, we are saying that, we are open to the fact that we may have to kill somebody to enforce this thing. That's what a law means. That is how threat and initiated violence work at a state level. And then excessive force is the last one. So there can be an argument made that this is just another form of initiated violence, but I don't think it is. I think it's this extra thing, and I think it's something that's been overlooked and forgotten. And I felt this way for a long time, but I have felt it much more keenly in the last year. So there's like this famous Supreme Court justice who said, I don't know what obscenity is. I can't write a definition for you, but I know it when I see it. We know what excessive force is when we see it. Now, I say the words excessive force. Everybody's mind automatically goes to a police officer who perhaps beats somebody that's already in handcuffs, right?
Right.
But it's not. Let me give you another practical example. So let's say in the aforementioned example, you were the bad guy and I pulled out a gun and you now are fleeing and I shoot you. Or worse, I walk up to you after you are no longer a threat. You are completely down. And we are now at that stage where peace can begin to be restored. We used to call police officers peace officers. Their job was to bring everything back to stasis, that normal comfort of life that was going on previous to the violence or the chaos that just ensued.
Yep.
If I go beyond that and I walk up to you now and I put the gun directly to your head and blow your brains out, I just committed murder, okay? And that's an example of excessive force. I was in a defensive mode, but I should stop at the moment that I have secured safety to myself or the persons around me that I was attempting to protect. And this too is already in law. Lots of people don't realize this. When you make a claim of self-defense in the court, what you are doing is admitting guilt. So you start off with every other case, you have the presumption of innocence. But you are literally waiving the presumption of innocence, and you are going to mount what's called an affirmative defense. So you're saying, yes, I pulled the trigger. Yes, it resulted in this action, but there are reasons. And I was justified in those reasons.
Right.
And in the state that I reside in, there's a 3-part test to see if your action was self-defense. And boy, it's a tough test to leap. So you really have to be circumspect and cautious in using it. But if you go beyond that, you engaged in excessive force. All right.
Okay.
Do you know what a USP is? In the marketing sense, the sales sense?
Yeah, the unique selling proposition, I think is how they taught us.
Yes, unique selling proposition. This is a very important idea. The unique selling proposition of the state is that violence is okay to solve social problems, or we can use force to get things done.
Yeah, that's embedded in our democracy.
Okay, so in libertarian speak, it's that force, coercion, aggression, these harm, the 5 things we just
discussed, 5 things,
which are fraud, theft, threat, initiated violence, and excessive force, are wrong. Both morally and pragmatically, it is superior to have voluntary interaction, persuasion to get things done, or just do it yourself. It's morally superior to do that. That is the libertarian USP. And it is not anything more. Like everybody that tries to put their baggage on it, it's not all those other things. It is an argument or a discussion about whether or not we are morally and pragmatically better off. We are more likely to flourish if we remove coercion and force. And to the degree that we can do that, we improve, because the principle of human respect says happiness, harmony, and prosperity. We take the violence and theft out, those things should go up.
Go up.
Okay?
I'm with you on this.
Good. Because I want to show now, I want to talk about the positions versus the persons. So let's talk about the positions first. Could you please put the Nolan chart back up on the screen?
Yeah, let's have a look here.
So we happen to have the version that we have for those that are listening, is the libertarian sector on this chart, which basically takes up the second base spot and down into the moderate and conservative progressive boundaries, right? We have that highlighted in blue, okay? Because we want to really call attention to it in this particular graph, which was provided to us by the presidents of the Advocates for Self-Government. He sent this over. Theadvocates.org is their website. We will put a link to the quiz, as I promised before, in the show notes, so you can see this chart for yourself. And you can even learn about the history of the Nolan chart. It's a fascinating story. That's the libertarian sector. Now, they give out a quiz. I don't know if you notice on the bottom sides. One says an economic issue score, and the other says a personal issue score. We don't have time to do the quiz on air today. But what I will say to you is that when you go to score this thing, agreeing with the position that's in front of you is worth 20 points. Putting maybe down is worth 10, and disagreeing is worth 0. There are 5 economic or fiscal questions on there, and there are 5 personal or civil liberties questions on there.
That's it, 10 questions.
10 questions. That's why it's the world's smallest political quiz. So you answer 5 on one side and 5 on the other. You plot it. You draw them to the line where you create an axis point, and now you know what your score is. You know where you plot it on the chart. The math is very easy to do. Okay. Now, it is possible for you to score. If you look closely at the chart, you can see the lines intersecting right in the middle of libertarian, or the word libertarian on the screen, to score 80 and 80, not 100 and 100, 80 and 80, and you are dead center in the libertarian Big Ten. That's the Big Ten of libertarianism right there. If you're anywhere in that box, you are more libertarian than you are conservative, more libertarian than you are progressive. Words are designed to differentiate things. Ergo, you are a libertarian. Now, if you lean a little right, I might say I'm a right-leaning libertarian. You lean a little left, you might say you're a left-leaning libertarian. If you are right down the center and closer to moderate, you might say I'm a centrist libertarian, right? You can modify it all day that you want, all right? But you are basically a libertarian in the broad sense. You can say out loud, I am a libertarian. But you only scored 80-80. And in fact, you can actually get there if you only score 70-70, if you look at it. And you can get there if you score 80-60. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's ways to get into that box where you didn't agree 100% with all those answers. Now, when I take
70-50, either way will get you there.
When I take the quiz, I get all the way to the tippy top. Okay? And I don't believe everybody has to get all the way to the top. I want to be clear about this. There's no purity test. You fit in the box, you're one of us. Now, someday when we get the government down so small that it fits inside the Constitution, we can, as Harry Brown said, go into a large arena and we can have a vicious debate over how we'll build our new utopia. And at that point, it will matter how much we differ. But we got a long way to go to get there. And I'm going to take as many fellow travelers as far down the tracks as I can with me. That is the big tent of libertarianism. And lots of people who hold a view that is unlibertarian fit in that chart. Now, positions. There's not the same degree of flexibility. You see those 10 questions that you answered, those 10 questions had a libertarian position attached to them, and disagreeing with them was the non-libertarian position.
Whatever it might be.
Right.
There's 4 different options for that. At least.
So but my point is there is a definite libertarian answer and there is a definite not libertarian answer.
Right. Yes, exactly.
And we could differentiate between these two things. So that's how the world's smallest political quiz works. I want to personalize this a little bit. There's another product that the Advocates has, and I was adjacent to the person that was working on this. I was reviewing their work as they went and discussing with them how to do it. There's another product that the Advocates has. People may not be as aware of it, called the single issue surveys.
Those are amazing. I've done some of them.
Yeah, we went into the one with guns. I talked to the person who actually wrote that today. His name is Steve Babka. I don't know if that name is familiar to anybody, but Steve Babka was working on that project. And I asked him to pick one question that he thought would help me illustrate a particular point I'd like to make. So I'm going to read the question, and I hope this doesn't turn into chloroform to do this. I hope people can follow along, not fall asleep in the middle of it, because the answers are highly detailed, and they're detailed for a reason. The statement has to be finished. It starts this way. In order to prevent school shootings, we must have, and now there are 3 answers. A, stronger gun control laws, along with increased funding for access to mental health services in schools.
Okay.
B, increased school security. Ways to do so might include more police officers on school property, metal detectors and security cameras, and making it more difficult to get inside schools.
Okay.
C, more choice. Teachers and administrators should be given the power to make the decision to be armed, and parents should have greater freedom to choose a school where their children would be the most safe. Okay?
All
so
right.
The first one said, we need more laws. The second one says, we need safer schools. And the third one says, we need more choices. Now, which one, first off, Bill, which one would you pick?
Oh, the third one.
Okay. You picked the libertarian answer.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was probably obvious to you by the time you heard all of them. Now, the difficulty in creating these questions that Steve faced when he was doing this is that a lot of people have over the years defined libertarianism as fiscally conservative, socially liberal.
Right.
And what they mean is that we start off maybe with those, what that comes to mean is we start off with those mindsets, and then we are allies with those people and those things. Well, we actually have a different motive. We have a different value system. Again, we care about that person. In fact, we often care about an underdog, right? So I'm going to tell you what the heuristic was, what the tool was, the lever that Steve used to come up with the answers and make sure that each of them were distinct and unique from one another. Because what was the risk was here that the libertarian answer could have been repetitive of the conservative answer if you hadn't really thought about this deeply or weren't very careful. What was different about being a libertarian from a conservative on a question of guns? So if you will notice in the answers that we gave, stronger gun control laws is focused on the object. It's saying that if an object is removed from the situation, we will have less violence.
Right.
But then they said, no, it's not the object. This object isn't to blame. It's the fact that we aren't using other objects and procedures to make you safe. So the National Rifle Association is literally an industry representative. They are an industry lobby. We have one side that is scared of guns. They have hoplophobia. We have another side that is very pro these tools. These tools are the greatest tools that are ever made. They're marvels of engineering, and they're just wonderful. And we have so much fun having these tools. Where is the human being in those things?
Exactly.
Well, the libertarian raises their hand and says, wait a minute. We shouldn't be banning anything, Mr. Progressive. And not everybody's into guns. But you know what we should be doing if we really cared about children, because that's what the question was originally about, is we should let parents decide where they're going to send them, and we should let those schools make their own individual decisions and figure out how they want to provide for the safety and security of their kids. We don't need any laws. We don't need any prohibitions or bans. We don't need to send additional funds to these. We can let all of them consider how they want to use the resources they have to provide that safety. It's focused on the individual. This is what the libertarian consistently does, is focus on the individual.
So take us through a couple of more.
Good. I would love to. Bombing. has individual victims to it. So even if you believe that a certain side in a given war might be the bad guys, recognize the fact that advocating for the bombing is going to kill a lot of innocent people. It may harm a culture and a society and set them back. It creates fear and resentment towards your country, may lead to blowback. Okay. But the libertarian position in this particular case would be to take into account that, like, oh, my actions are going to have these long-term consequences on individuals and will decrease their happiness, harmony, and prosperity. So this is an argument. This is an argument, a fundamental one, by the way, against having the state intervene. Now, there's another argument that's very good against having the state intervene. They collected all of their money through taxation, so they have no incentive to be good at spending it. They didn't earn it. They stole it. So they're not going to be necessarily good at serving any kind of customer base in what they do. They're not going to be as surgical or careful as they need to be. They're going to make really awkward, bad mistakes. They're going to do it frequently with inferior equipment because it was built to satisfy the needs of a general to get a job after he left the Pentagon and the need of that contractor to make as much profit as possible off of tax dollars, and on it goes, right? A better argument is that I recognize there are individuals pursuing happiness in there, and their happiness, their harmony, their prosperity will decline if I bomb the place. Okay? We already mentioned tariffs. They are a tax. For anybody that's confused, they are a tax. You don't have an option whether or not you don't want to pay them. That's a false argument. You have to survive. You have to buy things. It's not good for anybody, but we do know that if somebody wants to get into a business and they're prevented from doing it, they can't assemble the things that they need or produce the things that they want because of the high prohibitive costs of the tariffs, their happiness, harmony, and prosperity will diminish. Specifically, their prosperity. Prohibition works this way. Prohibit anything. From drugs to persons, you're going to diminish the happiness, harmony, and prosperity of individuals.
Yep. We actually have history on that one.
Yeah. And then immigration.
This is a tough one.
The actual libertarian position. Maybe people are afraid to confess this. Maybe other people are afraid that this is actually accurate, but there's been a knee-jerk reaction to this for a very long time. The actual libertarian position is the open borders position. Now, borders are such a sidelight here. What actually matters is that, Bill, you want to have a relationship with another human being. They may happen to be across the border. Maybe they come to your neighborhood and meet you, and you say, I want to work with you. Do you know who matters in that transaction?
Well, I mean, both of us do.
Yes, and who else?
Nobody.
Nobody. It's nobody else's business.
Nobody else is
Mind your own business.
Yeah.
But free association trumps all of that. Your ability to associate with that person is your choice. Their ability to associate with you is their choice. Both of you did it because you believed you were going to mutually increase your happiness. That's what happens in every market transaction, from friendship to the stuff you buy, is that we are able to maximize our happiness. When I buy an object, I part with dollars on the hopes that the object I'm going to acquire will make me happier. The person who sold the object wants the money more. They're going to use it to go acquire other things that will make them happy. And that is the way we increase happiness. And free association, the ability to make those choices for yourself, is key to being able to maximize your happiness, your harmony, and your prosperity. So let's imagine that 4 people live on the southern border of the United States, or maybe the northern border, because, I'm concerned about those rampaging Canadians rolling around down across the top of it, right. But we're going to put them at the southern border in this particular example. And let's say that they're named Jim and Bill and Bob and Dale. Okay. So Bill wants to have immigrants invite an immigrant across the line. He lives right on the border. But Bob and Dale don't really like this at all. So they come up with this idea that there must be a wall. So they call me on the phone. They call Jim and they say, we're really tired of Bill inviting these people to come over to his house. We don't like them. They don't belong here. This is really bad that they're on that property. Will you get together and gang up on Bill with us so we can build a wall? And the wall is metaphorical. It's any system that's designed to keep Bill from being able to associate with the people he chose. The question isn't up to Bob, Dale, or Jim. The question is up to Bill. because the individuals are what matter here. They should be able to pursue their happiness, their harmony, and their prosperity. You with me so far?
I am, but I have a question for you.
Go for it.
What if the activity that I'm conducting with this guy who comes across the border turns out to be illegal?
Illegal in what sense? What did you do?
Like
what are you doing?
Maybe he's running fentanyl over to me, and I'm a distributor.
Nobody else's business. That's a whole question we could get into on the drug war, and I'd rather not go too deeply into that one today because it's an involved subject. But we also wouldn't have a fentanyl problem, just to be perfectly blunt, if we allowed people to get proper treatment between them and their doctor.
Yes. As we can see happening, thank you, Dr. Gabor Mate in Vancouver. He's doing a great job illustrating that this works.
I hope that's sufficient. There's more to say, and people can argue with it, but it wouldn't matter. It just simply doesn't matter.
Yeah, the principle is the thing.
Yes, the principle is the thing. So I want to close out this episode by illustrating two ways that libertarians build their philosophy. These are two of the better ways. One of them I think is ideal. My primary one is the philosophy of human respect. And I want to make that part clear. But before I do, I want to do another one, which is called self-ownership, because it kind of puts the human in human respect. It kind of illustrates something that's logically very, very important. And again, we're back to breaking things down into two categories. So self-ownership, the concept of self-ownership starts with an axiom. It's going to shock you. It's going to knock your socks off. You're going to be like, whoa, 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 Jim.
Well, maybe not me, Jim, but
you own yourself. Bill, you own yourself. I own myself. Everybody listening owns themselves. No one else owns you because, and this is a logical statement, this is what makes it axiomatic, logically speaking, the opposite of slavery. Someone else owns you. So if no one else owns you, if slavery is illegal, if slavery is immoral, if you don't want to be a slave, if you believe other people should not be slaves, you believe in the concept of self-ownership. If you own yourself, then how you dispose of and use your resources, your time, your body are your business, so long as, because this would be the other contradiction, you don't interfere with the self-ownership abilities of others.
Anyone else, yes.
Right? So that creates a boundary that everybody can respect and understand. Okay? So this is kind of a fundamental idea. It's logical, based on an axiom, and just following the two logical derivatives. But I favor human respect because it's grounded in a principle that we can consistently observe. And you don't have to belong to any faith tradition, religion, value system. You can believe this if you're conservative or progressive or whatever. You can see it. It's cause and effect. That's what a principle is. So when Isaac Newton coded out what gravity is, when he wrote the formula, he called it the principle of gravity. That was the word that they used in science at the time. Our modern word is scientific law, but we want to get anybody confused with a difference between us government law, because it doesn't have that same kind of certainty. Like if government said we're going to fight obesity by changing the scale, right? And everybody's going to automatically be lighter because we've re-regulated what gravity means practically. That doesn't actually solve the obesity crisis, right?
Right.
Government can't defy natural laws. Natural laws don't care about your feelings. They just don't, right? If you gained weight, you're heavier, right? If you and that may have come out as bad eating or not enough exercise or whatever. You gained weight, you're heavier. Just period. It doesn't care about your feelings. And gravity, letting go of this pen and letting it go down, it doesn't care about anybody's feelings. It's cause and effect. It's how nature works, and we can repeatedly observe it. And after we've repeatedly observed it enough, and maybe even turned it into a formula like gravity is, we can also do other things derivative off of that. We can build on that idea. Okay? So that's how a principle works. We actually want to be principle finders, because the more that we're in harmony with nature, the less resistance we have, the more we're able to be profitable, the more we're able to be efficient, the more we're able to achieve our goals with less. The less you use to achieve the more. That's the very definition of wealth. I'm going through this very fast, but I want to say this principle stuff is a big deal. You need to understand what a principle is, and you should be on the hunt or lookout for them. Okay? So then under the philosophy, once you recognize that, okay, we desire to flourish. So this is where we start. We desire to flourish. What are the best conditions under which we flourish? That's our goal here. How do we achieve human flourishing in the philosophy of human respect? We start off with three axioms real quick. First, everyone has a fundamental drive to be happy. Okay? Now, you can debate with me. You can pick apart the finer points and say, I don't do everything for my happiness. So let me modify it and say your relative happiness. There might be things that you're going to do that don't make you happy. They don't give you bliss, joy, euphoria. Okay. They basically, though, in the choices that you had available, they were the least painful option in some cases, because that's how you work. That's how everything in nature works. Trees grow towards the sun, and a dog on a hot day will leave and lay in the shade, right? He'll leave the sun and go lay in the shade because we want to be happy. So we have things that will make us happy, and we have goals, and what's going to make you happy and me happy may vary quite a bit. You may have different customs and habits and aesthetics and values that may define differently for you than are for me. And that's what makes us all unique and special, right? That's part of the package. But you have a desire in all cases, in all instances, to pursue happiness. It's always got its hand on the wheel of your decision making. Second and third, they go together. There's one right after the other. They're almost identical in statement. The first one is that violence always decreases happiness. If you're offed, right? Somebody takes a shot at you. They're a hitman, right? And they make contact with you. Even if you survive, if you survive, your happiness is going to go down. Your sense of harmony with the world around you is going to go down. Your sense of happiness, of prosperity, all those things go down. Same thing's true of theft. No one, we have our stuff. We worked hard to get our stuff. And if I come home and I find that somebody scrawled graffiti on the side of my house, or if somebody took a sledgehammer to my car, or if somebody came into the house and stole the computers and the electronic goods, I am not at that moment happier. I do not feel a greater sense of harmony with my fellow man. I'm very angry, hurt, and I'm clearly less prosperous. My property's been damaged, and I'm going to have to pay to fix it. So that's how we get to the principle. We can see that these things are all axiomatically true, and we arrive at a cause and effect principle that every single time someone experiences theft and violence, their happiness, harmony, and prosperity will decline. That is the natural principle of human respect. But what does this mean? What do we do with it? That's where we come up with the acid test of human respect. The acid test of human respect shows you how to apply this concept. Because now that you're aware that, oh my gosh, this actually reduces flourishing. Those flourishing factors of happiness, harmony, and prosperity go down when theft and violence. What do you do with this information? You actually answer the following question. What kind of leader are you? What kind of problem solver are you if no one is forced to listen to you? How do you go about getting things done? So you have three choices. There are only three choices on the board. Okay. One, I can do it myself. I see a problem, I do it myself. I was just explaining in another call I was in today that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., as part of his commitment to his own narcotic recovery, has a habit that he follows, that he picks up litter that's in front of him. If it's in his path, he'll pick it up and throw it at the nearest receptacle. This has to do with connecting properly with his higher power and keeping his commitments, starting with keeping a commitment to himself. People who are in 12-step recovery programs will understand the spiritual significance and psychological significance of that act.
Sure. Yeah.
He's solving the problem of litter, not in some global sense. He's doing whatever is right in his path. So you can do stuff yourself. If you see someone homeless, you can give them some money. Then you say, wait a minute, there's a bigger problem here. And I really want to tackle this. And what most people instinctively, knee-jerkingly do is they turn to the state. I want to talk about that in just a moment, but there's one third alternative that's overlooked, and that is being a problem solver. That is being a leader. So I can take a variety of voluntary or persuasive actions. This is the third option, where I get people together to get something done. And you want to know the irony of going the status route is that it too requires persuasion. I got to get a lot of people on board my team to get something done. In fact, let me go one step further. I'm going to bring Harry Brown into this because he used to talk about something called the dictator fallacy. So this was the pretense that you're the king, right? And you have designed the world's ideal program for how to fix the problem. I mean, you are so smart. You are an engineer extraordinaire. You know exactly how to solve the problem. The problem is you're not the king. You ain't the dictator. And it's not going to be done your way. First, we're going to go to the politicians, and they're going to haggle, and they're going to do all this stuff, and they're going to compromise, which means both sides end up getting tossed aside, and they're going to not do your plan at all. In all the haggling, they're going to come up with something that's inferior. And everybody in shot of my voice who's on the left knows what I'm talking about, because if in 2007, when you were considering whether or not you were going to elect Hillary or Barack to carry out your idealized version of socialized medicine, you didn't get it. You didn't get what you wanted. And in fact, you're still belly aching to this day that, oh, it's not what we really wanted. It's not true socialism. It's not a really comprehensive program. They did this wrong and that wrong and the other wrong. Because yes, you dictators didn't get your way, and you're never gonna. But it doesn't stop there, because every action isn't carried out by the dictator either. Assuming you were the dictator, you would have to delegate some of your authority to managers, who would delegate it down in the C-suite, down to people who are in the middle management, down to people who are actually executing the day-to-day thing. Every one of them has their own dreams, their own goals, their own aspirations, their own values, their own ways of looking at things, and they're not going to share yours, and they're going to do it wrong. So your idealized version isn't going to work. This whole system is a facade. It cannot work. Pragmatically speaking, it cannot work, and you're not the dictator. But you can decide to build a charity or create a cause. Or maybe you're really busy and you don't prioritize the issue that much, but you just want to do a little something. You can give to the cause, either your time, you can volunteer, or you can give a small donation amount. And there's no limit on your donation. You could choose to give $10. You might choose to give $100. You might choose to give $10,000. You might choose to give away your life savings. Maybe you decide to volunteer an hour a week. Maybe you do 10 hours a week. Maybe you decide that you're going to quit your job and devote full-time energy to this voluntarily, right? All of those options are in front of you, choosing your own happiness, your sense of creating harmony in the world, and your desire to feel prosperous. You make those decisions, but you didn't have to tax or take from anybody else to do it. You didn't have to put anybody else into your scheme.
Or petition endlessly to get the state to do something about it.
Because you can't skip that step. That step is never skippable. You can persuade people and start today. There's real genius in starting today. I can go out and begin doing something, even if it's small today. All the time spent lobbying is wasted on not solving the problem. People are having such a good time going out protesting and waving signs, and they're not changing things. And even if they do, it'll never change to what they really hope it'll be. But they could go out and build the thing they hope exists, and they could try to attract other people to that thing. And I've seen this work.
I have too. The act of building it is so critical to its success. If you delegate that act, forget about it. You won't get what you want.
In Habitat for Humanity, the person who's going to be in the house is required to put in hours helping. And they're working right alongside the volunteers. They're there on the volunteer days.
Yes.
So the volunteers know who they're serving, and a sense of community bond is created. Politics does exactly the opposite. In fact, I want to close on where grace isn't and where it is. It isn't in the conflict machine. The conflict machine is a system to address social problems that divides members of societies into warring parties where there must be losers.
Yes.
Let me say this again. There's tribal division and there must be losers. I didn't say losers and winners. I said losers.
Losers.
Someone has to lose. It has to be at the expense of someone. And now the conflict machine is just a more accurate description of what we call politics in this country. And it lacks grace. And all you have to do is turn on social media to find what I'm saying. All you have to do is turn on the media to see what I'm saying. It is war. Politics is war by other means. And we don't need to go to war to solve social problems. It turns out if we ask ourselves the acid test and we really take that seriously, we can walk through a process where we can solve any problem. We can get together and get it done. We can come up with a plan.
I'd modify that and say we solve any problem without the state.
Without the state.
Without the state.
And I love that you brought up the state, because another thing that it isn't is the state. So Max Weber, he's kind of a founding father of sociology. That's politically incorrect to say, but that's kind of his position. And he said that the state is the entity that has the moral authority to initiate force in a given geographic area.
Say that again. He claims the state has the moral authority.
The state is the entity. That's really the definition of a state. The state is defined as being the entity that has the moral authority to initiate force in a given geographic area.
Well, unless you've got a benevolent dictator in charge.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is the USP of the state. This is the unique selling proposition of the state. They bring force to the table. They can force people to come to the table. This is the USP of the mafia. They can force people to do things they don't want to do, right? This is not how businesses work. This is not how families work. This is not how friendships work. They don't work this way. These are voluntary organizations. You can choose to participate or not participate. You can quit your job. You can quit your marriage. You can get a divorce. There's all these things that you can do to restructure your life, but you can't quit the state. You can't resign from taxes. You can't divorce your politicians to get elected to office. You're stuck with them. And you're stuck with all the bad things they do with your money that they took from you by force, by threat of force. These ways that they harm people, these ways that they violate the principle of human respect. So these are two things that are not. And anytime someone as a libertarian starts to defend some element of the state, they may still be in that libertarian bloc. They're part of that tent. But on that issue, they are no longer advocating a libertarian position.
Right. I see that. I see how that split works.
Okay.
And we have to be able to deal with people in that place because there are a lot of them.
Yes. Now, if we have time, we have a clip.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
Before we close this, because there's something that I want to sort of make this maybe a flag in the sand here. And you're a historian. Has the world ever been in this place where we have this kind of awareness of human respect and we're experiencing the conflict between, or the contrast between how that human respect-based principle fits in with the way the world has been for so long? Is this new now in our civilization at this time in history?
So I think there are people along the way that have had awareness. There's the Martin Luther King version of nonviolence, the Gandhi, Tolstoy version of civil disobedience. There is,
but this
there has been the
worldwide.
the golden rule has been there all along. It's in every major religion in some form. It's in several philosophical systems. Immanuel Kant, in particular, had a kind of in Star Trek they talked about a prime directive. There was medicine has do no harm. So there's been some variation of this out there for a very long time. What I think is interesting about human respect is it has said, if you want flourishing, you can't get it by using force.
By force.
It shows cause and effect why that's not true. And that's what I think its real strength is. And I'm involved, full disclosure, with the Foundation for Harmony and Prosperity, whose mission is to advance this. That's another place I work.
Well, I've seen programs worldwide that are sort of committed to this idea of doing something better than we've done in the past, like based on human respect.
And every time, and by the way, they don't have to necessarily be aware of this philosophy or this principle in order to be carrying it out.
Oh, sure.
They could, as a matter of their own personal value system, be attempting to solve a problem voluntarily, and they are practicing human respect when they do. They are failing to practice human respect when they were willing to resort to threats backed by actual violence, or when they believe it's okay to take other people's money to fund their values and their goods.
At some point or another, this idea of human respect just sort of comes home and sits down, and everything else that you've done pales in the light of human respect.
Yes.
And that's a come to Jesus moment. I'm going to say it that way, but come to whatever, it's a spiritual moment where your awareness changes and you go, wait a minute. War is such a bass-backwards way of getting the thing done.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Why can't we try this other thing?
Well, I think to some sense, there are people who are very stuck in their ways, and we've been raised to believe certain things about our world.
Sure.
And so in conversations I've had with people like this, they're going to say, well, wait, are we going to stop voting? We can't stop voting. Are we going to stop having congressmen? We can't. And presidents, social contract. And like they just don't know what to do because it's so, the implications of this is that we don't need those things to truly flourish, to solve problems. If we want to live up to this acid test of being a good leader or a good problem solver, we're not going to waste time trying to organize marauding bands to take stuff from people, right?
Right.
We're going to evolve past that point to something better than when it's been offered up till now. And this is, a relatively new concept or a new way to explain it.
But we don't really have a crosswalk that's nailed up. We're not facing, King George and saying no more T-tax. We have this in place operational system that we want to evolve into a different kind of in-place operational system based on the principle of human respect. Nobody's standing up and saying, and here's how we can do that. Instead, they're standing up and saying, no, you're wrong, right? And being able to transition from where we are slowly toward that other place, which isn't utopia, people. It's another way of processing the stuff we have to process all the time. But transitioning is not being offered here. It's like, if you have a different idea, they just slap you away at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Because most people are caught up in who's winning. And there's two sides, and one they fear and the other they root for and they associate in a tribal sense out of security, for the same reason that people may, when they're in a really bad prison, join a gang, right? Because to not be in the gang, you feel vulnerable.
Well, so you're coerced and you have to.
You got to go along with one of the gangs, right? And that is where our political system is. And in the conflict machine, they are trying to put us at each other's throats. That is key. And all these culture war add-ons that people wanted to put into libertarianism, whether left or right, they are wrong. Whether left or right, they are wrong.
Amen. You give me human respect, I'll listen to you. Give me left or right, talk to somebody else.
Let's roll that clip. I have an increasing conviction that through force, through aggression, people are not able to express their happiness. They're not able to achieve harmony. They're not able to have the level of prosperity that they should have. And the combination of these things means that they're depressed or they're down below where they actually should be. So if you took the coercion, if you took the aggression out, they would automatically come up to another level.
Right? Exactly.
Right? Okay. Yeah. But that's not where it stops. Where if they once that happens, there's a second gear that kicks into place, because now they're actually able to fully actualize. Yes. And the more fully they actualize, the more they make the world better for everyone around them.
Yes.
They innovate and create, whether it's art or technology. They work, they produce, they enjoy the value of that. They give, they share, they erect charitable works. There's just so much that they end up doing because they're able to start to actualize. So that is from a June 2024 episode of Gracearchy. We'll put that episode down in the show notes too. I wanted to play it because I said exactly what I meant there. And this is my final grace point. We want flourishing.
Sure.
But I don't know what that looks like for you. So any attempt to add on other things and impose them by the state, or have the state promote them, or have a political party say these are the things that we also want, waters down and ruins this concept. You may not like the cut of my jib. You may not think that my choices are the best choices for me, but you're not me. And you don't know what it is that makes me tick or why it is the way it is. Some things I just got to learn. You may even be right, but I got to learn them. I'm not going to learn them any other way than the hard way. Okay. And you can't artificially accelerate that date. What you'll probably do is the exact opposite. You'll probably boomerang and backfire.
Right, right.
And the only thing, like, I think of our show in the following way. I think of our show as saying, I will be first. Here's what grace is. I will be the first one to stop arguing. I will be the first one to stop and listen to what you have to say and really hear you. I will be the first one who not only will lay down arms, I will even reach out. I will go the extra mile here. I will see if there's some way in which I can be of service to you. As Daryl Davis, and we'll put his 2 episodes down in the show notes too, as Daryl Davis does. I will do those things instead, so that we can get off this constant cycle of vengeance back and forth, of trying to make the other side, enjoying the salty tears of the other side. We will get off of that. We will remove ourselves from the conflict machine. We will stop using the state against each other, because we are going to start agreeing to lay down arms and talk to one another, get to know each other. And it turns out that even if our values are different, you'll be surprised how many things that even people's values differ, they can find ways to work together despite it. Their kids can be on the same ball team. They can belong to the same civic organizations. They can solve the same social problems. It might be a small donation. Your neighbor's really big on a cause. It's not a big deal to you, but you really like your neighbor, and you say, hey, here's $10, here's $50 for your cause, because I know you're trying to do something with it.
Sure, yeah.
Right. But you wouldn't. Now, if it was political, the two of you would be pitted against each other and you would be bitter enemies. If we were deciding all these questions, you would have to treat that person differently. And we see people literally say not only silence, but punch someone in the face or cancel them or censor them or do something to take them out of the equation. Grace is saying, not only are we going to stop doing that, but we're going to reverse that, and we're going to start to reach out in a way that really affirms and listens to the human being and tries to understand their position in a way that I can steel man it, not straw man it. And it says further, I might even do an act of service for this person. I might do something to show I have regard for them as a human being, that I recognize they're made in the image of God. I might also give them a little deference because, you know what, I'm wrong about a lot of things, and I may even inadvertently hurt other people I didn't mean to hurt with things I said and did and acted. So when they're doing their thing right now, maybe I should give them the benefit of the doubt. And I'm going to show them acts of kindness. I'm going to pay it forward. I'm going to find ways to solve problems socially through voluntary and persuasive means. This is what we're trying to get on at Gracearchy. I want to end this conflict machine nonsense. I want to get people out of this amygdala drive, this fight or flight mechanism that they've got going on right now, where they're just at each other's throats, right? And they don't know what to do. And it doesn't solve problems. It doesn't increase flourishing.
I've been doing this. I'll just be honest. I've been doing this way more than I want to, and I've got to flip that and spin it around and do something different. And what you're encouraging right now speaks to me, because I want to change. I want to change the way I've appeared in the world and to support myself as a flourishing person.
I think that's a great choice, and that's what I hope everybody that just watched this wants to do too.